I thought I knew Ohio, having crisscrossed its highways and byways countless times, but one particular town, nestled amidst rolling hills and seemingly picturesque landscapes, left an unsettling chill in my bones that I can't shake to this day. It wasn't the crumbling buildings or overgrown cemeteries that unnerved me. It was the palpable sense of unease and the inexplicable occurrences that painted a portrait of a place steeped in darkness.
Building. The Bissman building was built in 1886, and fun fact, the film Shawshank Redemption used this place as a filming location. If you have seen the film, the building is used as the entrance to the Brewer Hotel, where Brooks and Red stayed after they were paroled from Shawshank. The real building, though, is haunted. While here many people experience a feeling of dread and sadness, particularly on the 3rd floor. Many people also report an overwhelming sensation of darkness when on this floor, so if I were you, I would just stay away from the 3rd floor in general. Disembodied footsteps, voices, being poked and pushed, black shadows, and dark figures caught in images seems to be something that happens a lot. Spirits of a young girl, Ruthie, her aunt, and the spirit of a retired worker who died in an accident before leaving the building are 3 identified spirits that stay here. In past investigations here, investigators have received audible responses to their questions. Yep, the ghosts spoke to them. One piece of audio evidence was when an investigator asked if they could speak to Ruthie, and a voice was caught saying, "Is Ruthie here?" In addition to Ruthie, people have witnessed the spirit of a woman throughout the upper floors, people in Victorian clothing, and the sounds of people working. Number 9. Staley Road. Sometime in the early 1800s, pioneer John Wrench used the services of 3 Staley brothers to build a flour mill. The finished structure was to become the first double-wheeled mill in Ohio. The business flourished, and after several years, John had made enough money to retire and ended up selling his mill to Elias Staley. The mill was then passed down to his brother Andrew and continued to produce flour until 1905. Today, the mill is still standing, and on Staley Road, named for the brothers, winds its way past and through the woods. It has become something of a rite of passage for local teens to drive this road at night to show how brave they are. It's been said that Old Man Staley went on a rampage, ending the lives of many, and is now haunting the road. Motorists say that they often experience unexplained car trouble, and some have even seen Staley's ghost standing next to or even lying in the road. Number 8. The Golden Lamb. As the oldest hotel in Ohio, the Golden Lamb has seen more than its share of famous guests, including Charles Dickens, Mark Twain, Daniel Webster, and 12 American presidents. Yeah. 12. It's fantastic, but there's also been death and tragedy in the hotel. Guests have cited a girl who may be Sarah Stubbs, the niece of the hotel manager in the 1800s, or possibly Eliza Clay, a girl who died of a high fever at the hotel in 1825. The ghost of Charles R. Sherman, an Ohio Supreme Court justice who died at the inn in 1929, is said to appear in the hallways as a gray, gaunt man and conjures the smell of cigar smoke. Charles's death left his wife and 11 children, including Civil War General William T. Sherman, penniless. As a result, most of his children were put up for adoption, and some say the guilt of his family's demise keeps his spirit at the inn. Number 7. Moonville Tunnel. Located deep in the woods, the tunnel is framed by a faded stone archway covered in moss. The tunnel itself is long and extremely dark. It's actually an out-of-work stretch of railroad track that leads to an old coal mining town. If you're brave enough to venture through it, you might see the ghost of Frank Lawhead, an unlucky train conductor who met his end in a head-on collision with another train. Visitors in the area have taken photos with cameras or phones, only to look back at them later and notice the pale figure of a man they didn't see before, or phantom train lights blazing at the end of the tunnel. It's also said if you listen carefully, inhale deeply, and blink intermittently, you may encounter spirits from another time. The piercing whistle of a train rounding a curve, the smell of lavender wafting from a woman in an old-fashioned dress, or even the glow of gaslit lantern illuminating the face of the weathered brakeman. so that's fun. Number 6. The Buckton Inn. The Buckton Inn was built by Orrin Granger in 1812 as an inn and tavern, and it also served as Granville's first post office and as a stagecoach stop. I'm just gonna say it, this place is haunted. The first ghost spotted in the Buckton Inn was the first owner, Orrin. Other ghosts include the Lady in Blue, rumored to be the former innkeeper Ethel Bonnie Bonnell, Major Buxton, whom the inn was named, and even a phantom cat seen slinking along the halls. There's been strange activity like footsteps and doors opening on their own reported in the inn's basement, where stagecoach drivers would often stay during their stopovers in the past. However, the ghosts just don't stay in the basement, oh no. Rooms 7 and 9 are said to be the strongest places for activity, with apparitions appearing. One guest even reported a ghost cat showing up to cuddle and purr in the middle of the night, which, like, aw, that's so cute. Guests have reported strange phenomenon throughout the hotel though, like their names being called out and invisible footsteps. I would not want to sleep there. Number 10. Malibar Farm. Malibar Farm was built in 1939 by Pulitzer Prize-winning author Louis Bromfield and was his home until his death in 1956. But before it was built, another family lived there in the 19th century. Celie Rose, a challenged young woman who lived there with her family, developed a romantic fixation on a neighborhood boy. When Celie's family told her to stop claiming the boy as her fiance, she mixed rat poison in their porridge. Her father and brother died, but her mother survived. At her trial, Celie couldn't understand why her parents didn't come to see her. After all, she said, the rats always came back after her daddy fed them rat poison in the barn. Afterwards, she went on and lived with her mother, whom, yes, she tried to kill, but then Celie poisoned her again, and this time it worked. At age 23, Celie stood trial truly alone, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a state hospital. She lived out the rest of her life in an insane asylum, and since then the house has been haunted. One visitor saw a woman dressed like Celie Rose outside the house, people have seen lights flicker, felt a phantom cat, disembodied voices are heard, and there's an overall eerie feeling on the property. Yeah. No kidding. Number 9. Beaver Creek State Park. Although this park is beautiful during the day, it has a darker side at night. A portion of the park was once part of a canal system from the early 1800s. There are 2 locks that are said to be haunted. Jake's Lock is said to be named after a former canal worker who was struck by lightning while walking across the top of the lock. He died instantly, but some claim that on certain nights, especially stormy ones, Jake returns with his ghostly lantern to continue his evening's work. Spooky. Nearby, Gretchen's Lock is said to be haunted by the ghost of a canal worker's daughter. Legend has it her father put her coffin inside the lock until he could load her body onto a ship headed for their homeland. But when the coffin was loaded onto a ship bound for home, the ship was lost at sea and didn't make it. Gretchen, pleading to rejoin her mother, reportedly makes an appearance at the lock every year on the anniversary of her death, which is just very sad. Number 8. The Wandle House. The Wandle House was constructed in 1916 by the Wheeling and Lake Erie Railway with funds contributed by railroaders. The Brewster Railroad YMCA featured 62 dormitory rooms used by the railroad workers, a restaurant, movie theater, and bowling alley. Today, the building is home to the Historical Society and houses memorabilia from baseball team photos, class pictures from Beach City and Brewster schools, railroad memorabilia and equipment, payroll records, and military uniforms. It's filled with tons of history, so those from the past like to visit. While there, you might come across Teresa, who worked in the eatery around the 1940s and 50s. People have also reported hearing noises, seen doorknobs turning on their own, and dark figures. And even one time, someone who was doing work in the basement of the building watched a person walk through a wall. Let me just say, I've seen a ghost walk through a wall before too, and it's creepy, so it's not something I'd like to see again. Number 7. Crybaby Bridge. Locals say if you stand on the Alliance Area Bridge at night, the sound of crying can be heard. Some say that mothers who did not want their sons or daughters during the baby boom would toss them from the bridge into the river below in the dark of the night. Others believe the cries stem from members of a cult kidnapping locals and ending their lives as part of their secret ritual. And finally, some say ghostly cries stem from a distraught mother who lost it after her daughter would not stop crying. In desperation, she tossed her over the bridge to her death, and upon realizing what she had done, the woman reportedly drove off the bridge. her own life. This is all around sad and creepy, but if I heard crying noises without anyone around and on a bridge nonetheless, I would be terrified. Number 6. Old Chestnut Grove Cemetery. The story goes a woman accused of witchcraft was executed and buried at the cemetery. The townsfolk did not erect a marker, but instead built an iron fence around her grave, which was next to an old tree. An indentation next to the tree inside the fence marks her grave, and it said that bad things will happen to those who get close to her grave. Another variation of the story says that several witches were executed and buried here, and their ghosts continue to haunt this area, which does not shock me. Not only did this happen, but on December 29, 1876, the number 5 Pacific Express was traveling over a high bridge carrying approximately 159 passengers and crew when the bridge collapsed. It sent the train and the people on it into the ravine below, and 92 people died. Many were burned alive while trapped inside the crushed cars and are buried in a mass grave at this cemetery. Due to this, people have seen ghosts of the passengers, and unexplained voices on tape have been recorded. Number 5. Woods surrounding London. Okay, again, not London, England, but London, Ohio. Deep inside these woods sits an old abandoned barn that is so rotted away it is practically melded back into the trees. It's rumored that ghosts like to spend some time here. If you ask anyone from the area, they'll tell you that these woods are haunted. According to legend, a family of 5 was traveling through the woods in the late 1890s when they were stopped and had their lives ended by a band of thieves. Those brave enough to wander through the woods of London at night have reported hearing gunshots and disembodied screaming. Others have felt a sudden drop in temperature before seeing a strange white mist hanging in the trees. Let me just say, it's a no for me. Number 4. Ridge's Asylum. Ridge's Asylum originally opened in 1874 and was known as the Athens Asylum for the Insane. It had 2 wings, one for female patients and one for the male patients. The most violent patients were housed at the outermost tip of each wing. By the start of the 1900s, the asylum had become dangerously overcrowded, and rumors of inhumane treatment at the hands of the overworked staff were growing. Despite this, it was not officially closed until 1993. Some parts of the building are still in use, while other areas are completely abandoned. One of the scariest places in the building is the outline of a body where Margaret Shrilling died in 1979. She apparently got lost in the disused part of the hospital in the winter of 1978-79 and was not found for more than a month. When the corpse was eventually removed, it left a stain that could never be washed away, which just makes me gag thinking about it, but imagine the smell, like, ew. Ugh. She is one of the many ghosts who is said to walk the asylum at night. Strange figures have been seen roaming around the old floors. Others have heard disembodied voices, footsteps, and screaming. Most appealing to imagination is the basement. Some claim severely disabled patients were kept on chains in dungeon-like places. Some say they've even heard the chains being pulled. Oh, and there's also a cemetery on the grounds which holds over 1,930 bodies. Of those, 700 women and 959 men lay under the headstones marked with only a number, which is sad. Number 3. Bobby Mackey's. Built in 1850, Bobby Mackey's is said to be the most haunted nightclub in America. When it was first built, the building served as a slaughterhouse and meat packing facility. The standard for most slaughterhouses of its day, the facility featured a well to collect the runoff of animal blood, innards, and other waste. If that image wasn't icky enough, there have also been several deaths in and around the club throughout the years. The place harbors energy so dark that a portal to hell is rumored to swirl somewhere within its basement. There is strange, suffocating heat, a trash can once flew through the air, and the apparition of a man with a handlebar mustache appears in the mirror. I would not want to get anywhere near that place ever. Number 2. Licking County Jail. Originally opened in 1889, the Licking County Jail is now home to only prisoners serving afterlife sentences. It contains stacks of cramped, grimy cells lining its dimly lit halls. Since being put out of commission, the jail has become a notoriously haunted hotspot. While it was operating, a total of 3 sheriffs and 19 inmates died on the premise. If you make your way to Licking County Jail, it's said you should peer between the cell bars as figures of prisoners listeners are said to peer back. Visitors have reported hearing cell doors slamming, being touched, whispering in your ear, whistles, the sound of footsteps, some of those being what seems residual, the jingling of keys, screams and moaning, as well as seeing strange light anomalies, full shadow figures, and photos with unexpected images in them. That sounds absolutely terrifying, and I would not want to go there. And coming in at number 1 is Sedamsville Rectory. The Sedamsville Rectory is a historical building that once served as the home for priests of Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church. Priests of questionable moral character were rumored to live here, if you know what I mean, including a man who was moved around considerably before retiring from the priesthood, leaving some to believe the church was covering up his tendency of mistreating animals. His fellow priests later confessed to hearing strange sounds coming from his bedroom and feeling uneasy in his presence. As the alleged site of the mistreatment, it's no shock that the place has some wicked demonic energy. Reports detail strange howling cries and deep scratches appearing in the flesh of workers. The current owner of the building, Terry Scott, even claimed that she was pushed by an invisible force. The presence was so evil that a priest was called in to perform an exorcism, but his efforts did little to keep the demonic energy at bay, and whatever monster lurked in there still remains, and I would not want to mess with it. Number 5. Massillon Public Library. Let me just say, there's more than books in this building. Before it was a library, it was a house, and former residents Clara Baldwin Barrick and Annie Baldwin both died in the home. Clara lived in the home from 1895 to 1909, and her daughter-in-law Annie died in the home in 1931. This might explain why this place is haunted. Some visitors have heard footsteps or smelt an unfamiliar perfume. Employees get a chill with no explanation in the outreach room located in the basement of the former home. A patron once claimed to have been pushed by an apparition while in the library, and a security camera in the library caught the elevator traveling to the 3rd floor at 3 a.m. The doors opened and a bright light could be seen, and the phenomena has been caught on tape several times, and there is no explanation, and that is just like an immediate no. Director Sherry Brown, who has worked at the library since 1979, said she was working in her office, a former bedroom of the home, after the library closed when she thought she saw an employee walk past her office door. She yelled out but got no answer. When she investigated, she found no one. Paranormal investigators have conducted research in the library and have gotten responses from the ghosts during electronic voice phenomenon sessions, and if you thought libraries were boring, let me just say this one definitely isn't. Number 4. Lock 4 Park. An incident occurred here in 1857 which has resulted in the park being haunted. A canal worker, whom some say was the lock tender, may have been angry about the potential of work being shut down and wanted revenge. The angry worker doused his fellow workers with a container of acid or some type of caustic liquid. It said the enraged worker tossed the lid open and flung the contents on his fellow workers, dumping the remnants on himself. Legend states that no immediate deaths ensued, but rather the men suffered gruesome, slower deaths that took several days. A few men perished due to their acid-eaten skin and organs. The man responsible also died. Today, screams and moans of those who were burned by the acid supposedly can still be heard by some if they listen closely while visiting Lock 4 Park. Also, the lock tender's cabin, which is located in the park, may also be haunted by the spirit of the angry worker. Number 3. Franklin Castle. Franklin Castle is reported to be the most haunted house in Ohio. Rumors about the eerie castle began to surface after multiple deaths occurred in the Tiedemann family while living in the mansion. The home was built in 1883 by Haynes Tiedemann, a banker and co-founder of the Union Banking and Savings Company. And let me just add that the house has 4 stories and more than 20 rooms and 80 windows. Now, Haynes allegedly tore down another house on the property where 4 of his children had died. His first wife, Lucia, died inside Franklin Castle in the 1890s. The American businessman would eventually bury 3 more of his children and his mother. Since then, the location has been the site of mysterious hauntings. A family with 6 children called the Romanos had moved into the house, and on the day they moved in, 2 of their children said they encountered a crying girl in white on the 3rd floor. But when Miss Romano investigated, no one was there. Soon, the family started hearing haunting organ music and heavy footsteps. house. Two of the older Romano children woke up one night to find something yanking the blankets off their bed, and Miss Romano once awoke to find herself screaming on her bedroom floor with an unseen presence screaming beside her. A priest advised the Romanos to move out, and in 1974 they did. But the hauntings didn't stop when the Romanos left. From there, the house was sold again and again and again. Each new occupant reported strange occurrences like passing through odd vapors, hearing a child crying, or seeing a woman in black standing in the window. Since reports of hauntings at Franklin's Castle increased, many turned their suspicions onto its original owner. Number 2. Sister Century House Restaurant. Now a restaurant, this building has seen a lot in the past. It was built in 1870 and has been home to several businesses in historic Canal Fulton throughout the years. It currently houses a family-owned restaurant, but was most notably home to a crematorium, which was located in the basement back in the early 1900s. I mean, since this place was once filled with dead people, it's no shock that it's haunted. There have been rumors of shadow people, a poltergeist in the kitchen, ghostly ladies in the basement, the entrance to an old tunnel, and even an unusual room that makes people a bit dizzy. The food though seems to be great, as the restaurant has a 4.6 star rating, so if you want to see some ghosts and have a great meal, I suggest you check this place out. And coming in at number 1, the Ohio State Reformatory. The Ohio State Reformatory opened its doors on September 15, 1896 to its first 150 offenders. These prisoners were brought by train from Columbus and put immediately to work on the prison sewer system in the 25-foot stone walls surrounding the complex. The Reformatory remained in full operation until December 1990, when it was closed via federal court order as a result of a prisoner's class action suit citing overcrowding and inhumane conditions. For example, in the late 1930s, a riot broke out in the East Cell Block. The guards condemned 120 rioters to share 12 solitary confinement cells for 1 week without food or water. This punishment drove many to the brink of madness and death. During its 94 years as a working prison, 154,000 inmates passed through the gates of the Ohio State Reformatory. Many died of diseases like influenza and tuberculosis, some went mad, others ended their lives, and at least one inmate lit himself on fire. Just outside the Reformatory, there are 215 numbered graves. While visiting, people have reported being pushed and punched by unseen forces. Many claim to feel a chill while on the prison grounds. People have also heard cell doors slam shut and seen dark apparitions. Even the road leading to the Ohio State Reformatory seems to be haunted. Local legend suggests it's the ghost of Phoebe Wise, a notorious hermit and eccentric.
We're going to start the list with Waynesville, Ohio. This is said to be one of the most haunted towns in the state, which is saying a lot for Ohio. Waynesville, Ohio is founded way back in 1797, and it has quite the history and its fair share of spooky stories. So sure, folks flock here for the antiques and the annual sauerkraut festival, but it's also known as a haunt for ghost hunters. You'll hear some odd sounds in the old buildings. You'll see shadowy figures peeking out of windows. With more than 15 spots rumored to be haunted, Waynesville has no shortage of creepy tales, like the Hamel House Inn, for example. Staff here have reported seeing a mysterious man in room 4, and some say a young salesman vanished there ages ago, possibly meeting a dark end. Then there's the Stetson House, where Louisa Stetson, Lyric, supposedly still roams, dressed to the nines in old-fashioned gear. There's also the former Friends boarding home, now a museum, where you might hear the sounds of ladies bustling about as if they're cooking up a storm, even though there's no kitchen anymore. Now we move on to Mansfield, Ohio. This place isn't just said to be haunted by, lame ghosts who will just pass right through your body if they ever try to punch you. It's also haunted by a big, scary, hairy, orange-eyed beast referred to as Orange Eyes, and you wouldn't want to get punched by Orange Eyes. But let's start with the haunted stuff. One of the most famous haunted locations in Mansfield is the Ohio State Reformatory, known for its imposing architecture and eerie atmosphere. Once a prison, the Reformatory is said to be haunted by the spirits of former inmates who suffered under harsh conditions. Visitors have reported strange noises, apparitions, and unsettling feelings while exploring it. And aside from the Reformatory, Mansfield is also home to, again, tales of a cryptid known as the Orange Eyes, described as a creature with glowing orange eyes and a menacing presence. Sightings of the Orange Eyes have been reported in the wooded areas surrounding the city. Some believe it to be a Bigfoot-like creature. Others think it could be paranormal in some way. Some even even believe it to be extraterrestrial in origin. Next up we have Boston Mills, aka Helltown. This is kind of like the Chernobyl of Ohio. So Helltown, Ohio, within the boundaries of Boston Township, is full, and I do mean full, of eerie legends and ghost stories. It was once a thriving community known as Boston Mills, but this area faced an abrupt evacuation in the early 70s at the hands of the US government, purportedly to establish the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Now the empty homes, the abandoned buildings and desolate streets that are left behind have this eerie vibe about them. You see, some locals insist that the evacuation wasn't solely because of the government's land claim. There are stories about much darker reasons. Apparently there was toxic contamination, with contaminants seeping into the soil. There are also stories about mutated animals and even people lingering around in the old abandoned homes. Not only that, but after the evacuation happened, there are said to have been satanic rituals carried out in the abandoned town. So, lots going on. Next up we have Athens, Ohio, which has multiple haunted spots. There's a haunted abandoned asylum, a haunted cemetery, even the university is haunted. And there's more cemeteries which are also all haunted. Every place in this town has ghosts. Half the population who lives here aren't even alive. Now, the haunted reputation mostly comes from its history with the former Athens Lunatic Asylum, now known as the Ridges, which is actually part of Ohio University's campus. The asylum's grounds still have old cemeteries where former patients were buried. One of the creepiest stories about the asylum is the story of Margaret Schilling. She was a former resident who died in the attic in 1979, and she was left there for so long that her decomposing body left a stain on the floor that remains to this very day. Wilson Hall, a dorm on Ohio University's campus, is rumored to be built on top of an old cemetery. The fourth floor of Wilson Hall is said to be haunted, with reports of apparitions, strange noises, and slamming doors. There's also a rumor about a student who took their own life in one of the rooms there. In addition to the Ridges and Wilson Hall, several cemeteries in the Athens area are rumored to be haunted, including Sims, Haynes, Hanning, Cuckler, Higgins, Zion, Hunter, Slaughter, quite the name for a cemetery, Cutler, Mansfield, and Peach Ridge Cemetery. Some say these cemeteries are actually arranged in the shape of a pentagram, with Wilson Hall right at the center.
Number 10. Newbury Airplane Boneyard. In Newbury, Ohio, resident Walter Saplata hosted a collection of military aircrafts from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Though often called an airplane graveyard, Walter would have preferred the term sanctuary, as he was saving the aircrafts from being turned into scrap metal. The sanctuary featured approximately 20 stray aircrafts that Walter collected from his scrapyard job in Cleveland, junking thousands of warplane engines that were declared surplus, according to his son Wally Saplata in a November 2007 issue of Air and Space magazine. Walter used to open his property to the public, but in recent years, the aircraft boneyard has been kept private. He passed away in November 2010, and today it is unclear what remains of the aircraft graveyard. Number 9. Geauga Lake Amusement Park. What was once the world's largest theme park is now an overgrown land of decaying roller coasters, empty concession stands, and abandoned ticket booths. In 1925, the park cemented its place in amusement park history when the Big Dipper roller coaster was built. At the time, it was the largest roller coaster ever built, but soon tragedy struck. Following all of its success, the park experienced some setbacks. In 1942, the park was hit by a tornado, 6 people were injured, and the park experienced a lot of structural damages, around $50,000. Further tragedy struck in 1952 when a massive fire engulfed parts of the park, destroying many key features of the park, including the famous dance hall, the theater, the roller rink, and the bowling alley, amounting to $500,000 in damages. From 2000 to 2004, the park was expanded and became Six Flags Ohio. From 2004 to 2007, it became known as Geauga Lake again under the ownership of Cedar Fair. But on September 21st, 2007, Cedar Fair announced that the park would not be reopening, and it has been abandoned ever since. Number 8. Cincinnati's abandoned subway. In the 20th century, Cincinnati decided to build a subway system after canals quickly became even more of a nuisance than they had been when they were bringing in trade. The plan was made in 1912 to build a 16-mile rapid transit rail system in a loop around the city, with a branch undergoing and heading downtown. More than 80% of the people of Cincinnati said yes to the new railway, but work on it didn't start until after World War I on January 28, 1920. Despite several delays, the 2-mile underground portion of the subway was completed in 1923. Proposals came and went in the 30s, but none were implemented. A 1948 study finally ended the Cincinnati subway for good, though efforts to do something with the tunnels have been constantly ongoing for more than half a century. Ideas have included a bomb shelter, a shopping and nightlife district, a massive wine cellar, and more rapid transit. The latest proposal is for another subway. I-75 was built, destroying a large segment of the underground passage, but one of the city's best-kept secrets is the fact that sections of the original subway still remain, including all 4 of the stations put in during initial construction. Today, all these passages are sealed off, and they are used by Cincinnati Waterworks only. Most of the entrances have been gated or concreted over. Now, access is both illegal and extremely difficult, and no people, this is not a challenge. Number 7. Chippewa Lake Park. Tucked away in the Medina County, there's a rusted, lost, forgotten Ferris wheel. What was once Chippewa Lake Park is now just a few piles of amusement park ruins and the lone Ferris wheel. From 1878 to 1978, the amusement park was a popular, thriving destination for family entertainment. It closed after the final owner, Continental Business Enterprises, closed it due to lack of attendance. After the park's closure, its rise and structures were left largely untouched and unmaintained for over 40 years. Today, remnants of it creepily stand abandoned, rusted, and long forgotten. And fun fact, in 2008, a cast and crew from Los Angeles filmed the horror film Closed for the Season there. Number 6. Kerr's Run Colored School. This schoolhouse for Black American children is one of the oldest remaining in southeastern Ohio. Currently, it's boarded up and overgrown with brush. The school educated children from the 1st to 8th grade, including James Edwin Campbell and James McHenry Jones, 1st and 3rd presidents of what is now West Virginia State University. The school remained in operation from the late 1880s through the early 1900s, and in 2007, a historical marker was added to the school's site. The sign briefly documents the history and legacy of the school. Now, the school is right beside an old church, and you can visit outside, but you shouldn't try to enter either building as they are in unsafe condition.
Next, we have Kirtland, Ohio, which doesn't have much of a reputation of being haunted itself. What it does have, though, is a reputation for mutated creatures that are said to stalk the forests. Creatures known as melonheads. Deep within its dense forests are tales of the mysterious and eerie creatures known as the melonheads. According to local lore, the melonheads are said to be humanoid beings with these abnormally large, bulbous, hairless heads, resembling melons. I picture them kind of looking a bit like Hey Arnold, which would be a lot less cute in real life. These elusive creatures are rumored to lurk in the shadows of the forests, emerging only under cover of darkness to stalk unsuspecting travelers. Now, there are a few different versions of the melonhead's tale, but the most well-known story or explanation for these creatures was that a mad doctor was conducting unethical experiments on a bunch of orphans. Experiments which caused their bulbous craniums to take shape. At one point, the orphans got fed up with being experimented on, and they hated their melon bulbous dumb heads, and they banded together, killing the mad scientist before setting his home on fire and running off into the woods. Sightings and encounters of melon heads, though, continue to be reported to this day. Cleveland is also said to have some creepy paranormal stuff going on, mostly from the supposedly haunted Franklin Castle, which is said to be Ohio's most haunted house. The Franklin Castle is a towering structure with a dark and mysterious past. Built in the late 19th century, Franklin Castle has long been rumored to be haunted by restless spirits. Stories of tragedy, death, and mystery surround it. Legend has it that the castle's original owner, Haynes Tideman, suffered multiple personal losses within its walls, leading to rumors of curses and supernatural stuff going on. Pretty soon after his family moved in, Tideman's mother died, His sister then died of diabetes, and over the next 3 years, more and more of his siblings died prematurely. Only 2 of the 6 actually made it to adulthood, so it's really no wonder why the place is said to have some darkness lingering in it. Over the years, visitors and residents have reported strange sounds, apparitions, and unexplained phenomena within the castle. Despite renovations and changes in ownership, one thing has always stayed the same: the paranormal activity. Next up on the list is Put-in Bay. Now, Put-in Bay, Ohio may be known for its sunny shores and summer fun, but lurking beneath the surface, there's some creepy stuff going on. From what I've read, there are 3 major haunted hotspots. First up, we have the Park Hotel. This hotel has stood since the late 1800s, and it's seen its fair share of guests come and go. Also means there's a lot of history, some of it dark. Some visitors have reported more than just creaky floorboards and old-fashioned charm. Rumor has it that the Park Hotel is haunted by the ghost of a young woman who tragically fell to her death from one of the upper floors. Guests have reported strange noises, flickering lights, and even sightings of a figure wandering the halls late at night. Next, there's the Dollar House, a Victorian mansion. Legend has it that the original owner, Valentine Dollar, was involved in some shady dealings during Prohibition, including smuggling alcohol and hiding it in secret passages throughout the house, and today visitors claim to hear whispers and footsteps echoing through the empty rooms, as if the ghosts of Dollar's past are still lingering within the walls. Then there's the Crow's Nest, a historic home that sits on a cliff overlooking Lake Erie. This mansion was once owned by Jay Cook, a banker and financier, but there's a tragic tale of one of Cook's daughters that's left its mark on the property. The story goes that the young girl fell to her death from one of the windows, and her ghost is said to still haunt the grounds, appearing as a fleeting figure in white. Moving on to Marietta, Ohio next, a charming town that also has its fair share of ghost stories, and most of the scary stuff happens at Hotel Lafayette. This hotel was built in the late 1800s. Over the years, guests and staff reported strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena while staying there, leading many to believe that the hotel is haunted by spirits. One of the most famous ghostly residents of the Hotel Lafayette is said to be a woman named Sarah, who reportedly took her own life in one of the rooms, and guests have reported hearing disembodied cries, footsteps, and even seeing apparitions wandering the halls late at night. Others have claimed to feel an eerie presence or sudden drops in temperature, but Sarah isn't the only ghost rumored to haunt the Hotel Lafayette. Some guests have reported encountering the spirit of a young girl who plays tricks on unsuspecting visitors by moving objects or flickering lights. A real brat of a ghost. But at least she's still having fun in the afterlife, so props to her. Next up, we have another kind of Chernobyl-like Ohio small town, Cheshire. Only a handful of people still call this place home. At one time, this was a bustling town, but barely anyone lives there at this point, and that's because of the environmental hazards caused by a nearby power plant. The plant emitted a thick, sooty residue and chemical fogs that would blanket the town sporadically. Obviously, not at all safe for residents to live in that kind of condition, so many abandoned their homes and started new lives in other places. Eventually, the power company responsible for the pollution was compelled to just buy out the entire town. But finally, we have the abandoned town of Moonville. Love that name, Moonville. This is a ghost town with only a few traces left behind: a cemetery, some foundations, and a desolate railroad tunnel. But what sets Moonville apart are the chilling tales that surround its abandoned tunnel. Stories that have been passed down for decades. One of the most famous specters haunting Moonville is that of Theodore Lawhead, the unfortunate engineer whose spirit is said to roam the tracks. Back in the 1880s, Lawhead met a tragic end when his train collided head-on with another. Now visitors report sightings of a ghostly figure with a lantern in his hand pacing along the track and disappearing into the tunnel. Then there's the story of the Brakeman, a ghost believed to be that of a young man who met his demise after a night of heavy drinking. Legend has it that he fell asleep on the tracks, never to awaken again because he was too sauced to wake up before a train ran him over. Then there's the Lavender Lady. Some say they've seen a frail elderly woman walking near the tunnel only for her to vanish into thin air, leaving behind the lingering sense of lavender. Some say she's the spirit of Mary Shea or Shay, who met her end on those very tracks. There's also the spirit known as the Bully, believed to be the restless spirit of Baldy Keaton, a Moonville resident who liked a good old fist fight. The tale goes that after a scuffle at the saloon, Baldy was found dead on the tracks. As for how he died, no one knows for sure, but now his ghost is said to loom above the tunnel, glaring at unsuspecting visitors and even pelting them with stones.
Number 5. Franklin Castle. Rumors about the Eerie Castle began to surface after multiple deaths occurred in the Tideman family while living in the mansion. Hans the father allegedly tore down another house on the property where 4 of his children had died. His first wife Louisa died inside Franklin Castle in the 1890s, and he would eventually bury 3 more of his children and his mother. Since then, the location has been the site of mysterious hauntings. A family with 6 children called the Romanos had moved into the house, and on the day they moved in, 2 of their children said they'd encountered a crying girl in white on the 3rd floor. But when Miss Romano investigated, no one was there. Soon, the family started hearing haunting organ music and heavy footsteps. 2 of the older Romano children woke up one night to find something yanking blankets off their bed, and Miss Romano once awoke to find herself screaming on her bedroom floor with an unseen presence screaming beside her. A priest advised the Romanos to move out, and in 1974 they did, but the hauntings didn't stop when they left. From there, the house was sold again and again and again. Each new occupant reported strange occurrences like passing through odd vapors, hearing a child crying, or seeing a woman in black standing in the window. Unfortunately, this house is privately owned, so you cannot go and explore all the spookiness, but there is a lot of rich history here. Number 4. Warner and Swayze Observatory. The Taylor Road Observatory was gifted to the Case School of Applied Science in 1919 by the Warner and Swayze Telescope Company. The original building was a domed tower construction with a powerful telescope that took advantage of the relatively undeveloped Cleveland sky that was at the time much more free of light pollution. The site continued to develop in the decades, growing with more buildings and facilities, but unfortunately by 1950, the growth of the nearby city was shining too much ambient light into the night sky, and the telescope had to be moved to a new location in Arizona. The Taylor Road facility continued to conduct astronomical research in the 1970s, but the site was completely abandoned in 1982. Vines and decay accumulated on the walls as time and neglect took their toll on the observatory. However, it was finally repurchased in 2005 by real estate mogul Nair Al-Mahid, who planned on returning the site into a luxury home. Unfortunately, his renovation didn't happen because in 2007 he was convicted of fraud and sent directly to jail. Today, the observatory continues to stand off Taylor Road, and it's best not to trespass and enter the building though because the area is unsafe. Number 3. The Peters Cartridge Company. The Peters Cartridge Company was once an integral part of the local munitions production industry, but now the factory is abandoned. Built in the 1860s, a large building complex was established to support the Peters Cartridge Company. The factory began producing shot and cannonballs for the Union Army during the Civil War, and then continued to produce American munitions into the 1950s. The factory had a lot of accidents though. In 1890, several train cars loaded with gunpowder collided and exploded, ending the lives of 20 factory workers. There were a number of fires and machinery accidents as well, leaving employees maimed and physically disabled. Before the factory finally closed, the site was repurposed to press vinyl for Columbia Records, but eventually nothing was made of the tall brick buildings. As the factory buildings are extremely decayed, local police supervised the Peters Cartridge Company closely. Urban exploration is not advised as floorboards are rotten and elevator shafts are empty in the buildings. Number 2. Helltown. Yep, you heard that right. Why anyone would want to go to Helltown with a name like that, I have no clue. Founded in 1806, Boston Village, aka Helltown's claim to fame was that it was standing as the oldest village in Summit County. Boston's relatively uneventful life took for a turn for the worst in 1974 when the National Park Service decided that Boston Township would be the new home for a new national park and began buying the properties of its longtime residents. The empty homes were boarded up and adorned with US no trespassing signs. But then the government quickly fell behind on its plan to create the park, and the village sat neglected. The hellish aura of the area only continued to grow when rangers visiting the site became ill and covered in rashes. It was soon discovered the dump was highly polluted with toxic chemicals improperly disposed of. Also in the village there is a church which is said to have been built by Satanists, complete with upside down crosses. this. There's an abandoned bus that is said to be host to a lingering ghost, and maybe the most outlandish of all, there is talk of mutants who were created by the chemical spill, including a monstrous snake known as the peninsula python. And coming in at number 1, Lima Tuberculosis Hospital. The Lima Tuberculosis Hospital was a tuberculosis sanatorium built in 1911 to deal with the leading causes of death in the United States in the early 20th century. Opening in 1911, it held 24 beds originally and was remodeled in 1927 to hold 158 beds. The capacity changed to 138 patients after an additional remodel occurred in 1957. The hospital was then renamed Ottawa Valley Tuberculosis Hospital in 1960, and by 1970 it was nearly empty. In 1972, the use of the second floor was shuttered and the entire hospital closed its doors in 1973. While the hospital was winding down operation, on January 10, 1972, it was agreed that the hospital would be transferred to the Allen County Board of Commissioners. Because of its relatively remote location and the use of hard-to-clean-up substances such as asbestos in the construction of the original 1911 building, the city of Lima did not prioritize demolition of the building. It's rumored to be haunted as well, and around Halloween of 2020, a large surge of trespassing at the site occurred, which led to an increased police presence and crackdown on trespassers. So don't even think of trying to visit.
We're gonna kick things off with Loveland. How on earth did I not put Loveland, Ohio in part 1? Loveland is home to one of the strangest creatures said to stalk the state, the Loveland frog. But it's also home to a supposedly haunted castle. Loveland Castle was constructed by Harry Andrews. Very interesting man this guy was. He had a lot of interest in knights and medieval lore. Andrews was born in 1890. He worked as a medic during World War I. He then contracted meningitis during the war and was believed to be dead. His body was actually moved to the morgue, like he was done. But when his body was taken back to the hospital to be dissected, the doctors were like, hey, you know what, why not? Let's just see if we can get his heart beating again with adrenaline. Miraculously, it worked. Andrews, who'd now spent a whole bunch of time in Europe and then almost died, was now even more into medieval history and returned home with this newfound determination to build his very own castle. Eventually, he constructed Loveland Castle along the banks of the Little Miami River. Andrews then moved into the castle, where he lived until he died in 1981. Today, the castle is the headquarters for the Knights of the Golden Trail, an organization Andrews started, dedicated to upholding the principles of knighthood, but Harry Andrews' spirit is said to still roam the castle grounds. Objects will mysteriously disappear or move, and voices are heard echoing through the corridors. And as I said at the top, of course, Loveland's supernatural reputation doesn't end with this castle. One of the most famous legends is that of the Loveland frog, or frogs. There have been multiple large frog-like creatures spotted near the Little Miami River over the years. Next up, we have Ashtabula, which is said to be haunted by the spirits of a tragic train disaster. So on December 29, 1876, the Pacific Express No. 5 crossed the Ashtabula Bridge, but because of particularly cold weather and structural weaknesses, the bridge collapsed, sending the train plummeting into the icy river below, and in the end, 98 people died. The scene must have been absolutely horrific, with rail cars crashing into each other and igniting in flame, and firefighters were unable to put out the flames, so people just cried out in pain and horror as they were consumed by fire, trapped in the wreckage. It was one of the worst rail accidents in US history, and the screams of those victims still haunt the area to this day. Some say you can occasionally hear them above the rush of the river. The Chestnut Grove Cemetery holds the remains of 19 of these victims, but their spirits are said to be very much active. Visitors to the cemetery have reported seeing ghostly apparitions. But along with the victims of the tragedy, there's also said to be the ghost of Charles Collins, one of the developers of the bridge. Witnesses claim to have seen his guilty spirit weeping at the sight of the tragedy or crying over people's graves. Some claim to see tiny lights even hovering below the new bridge where the old one once stood. Rogues Hollow near Doylestown, Ohio has its fair share of spooky tales as well. It's said that a mill worker died in a pretty gruesome manner, getting crushed by the mill wheel, and now his spirit is said to guard the area, keeping outsiders at bay. Then there's the eerie tale of the headless horse and the ghost oak tree. So at one time there was a large oak tree near Route 65, and one of its branches hung so low that riders on horseback had to duck as they passed under it. Well, one story goes that the branch was weighed down extra low with ice, and a poor horse just ran into it at top speed, lobbing off its head. From that point on, riders passing the area late at night would occasionally come across a devilish figure riding a ghostly headless horse. Next up we have Oxford, Ohio, which has one of the coolest ghosts, a phantom motorcyclist. So the story goes that back in the 40s there was this farmer's daughter. She was head over heels for this guy who was a bit of a James Dean type, leather jacket, motorcycle, very rebellious. Also a lot like me, minus the motorcycle, the leather jacket, and the rebellious part. His name was James, that's the similarity. And her father was not too thrilled about their relationship. He thought the guy was trouble, and he probably wasn't wrong. He forbade his daughter from seeing him. So to avoid her father's disapproval, they met up in complete secret, usually late at night when the coast was clear. And when it was, the girlfriend would flash the porch light 3 times as a signal for him to come over. Well, one night, the boyfriend decided he wanted to take their relationship to the next level and propose. He saw the 3 flashes and revved up his motorcycle, racing towards her house to pop the question, but as soon as he sped down the road, he lost control of his bike, crashing into a barbed wire fence. And ever since, people claim they've seen this mysterious light flickering in the distance along the road where he crashed, said to be the spirit of the phantom motorcyclist, still trying to reach his girl's house to ask for her hand in marriage. Next on the list is Chillicothe, where there were a series of mysterious disappearances between 2014 and 2015. Now, it all began in the spring of 2014 when Charlotte Trago vanished without a trace. Trago, who had struggled with addiction, was a mother of 2, and she remains missing to this day. Shortly after Trago's disappearance, another woman, Tamika Lynch, who was a friend of Trago's, went missing as well. Her body was discovered 3 weeks later by kayakers. It's pretty obvious there was foul play, but the official cause of her death was deemed inconclusive. Then there was the disappearance of Wanda Lemons in November of 2014. She's also never been found. On Christmas Day 2014, Shasta Hemmelrich went missing. Her body was later recovered from the Scioto River. Authorities claim she took her own life, but her family, as well as many others, think someone took it from her. Then there was the disappearance and discovery of Tiffany Sayers' body in May 2015. Her remains were found in a creek, covered by a sheet. And the final victim, Timberly Claytora's body, was found near an abandoned building. She died at the hands of a firearm. And the case just would have been handled completely differently if these women hadn't been battling addiction. That was the one thing connecting all these. They were all involved in that world. And there's just this kind of lax attitude when it comes to situations like this, unfortunately, where authorities are like, well, they're part of that world. This is just what happens. So it really hasn't got the attention that it deserves. Preble County has a number of reportedly haunted hotspots, including Brubaker Bridge. Brubaker Bridge was built in 1887 over a creek. The bridge became rather infamous after a tragic accident in the 30s. A group of young folks coming back from a party crashed their car inside the covered bridge. The impact was so severe that their bodies were flung from the vehicle in pieces. One young man was initially thought missing entirely, but was later found to have been ejected so far from the car that it landed in the brush, and his body was completely overlooked and was eventually lost to the elements. Since then, people crossing the bridge have reported strange occurrences like car engines mysteriously dying and a tapping sound on car windows, which some believe is the young man still trying to be found.
Next on our list is the Mansfield Reformatory, also known as the Ohio State Reformatory, and the inspiration behind Shawshank Redemption. It was also temporarily home to country music singer David Allen Cole, Confederate Army General John Hunt Morgan, mobster George Bugs Moran, and gangster aides Charlie Mackey and Harry Piper Point. During the prison's years of operation, over 200 people died on the grounds, including guards who were killed during a prison escape. Illnesses ran rampant throughout the institute. Riots often broke out, and one inmate even set themselves on fire. At one point, 120 inmates were jammed into 12 solitary confinement cells and kept without food and water for days, which caused many prisoners to go mad, kill and kill one another. And of course, as it so often goes, many of those who died in the prison are believed to have never left. Visitors to the former penitentiary have reported being pushed and even punched by unseen forces. These ghosts are mad. People have also felt inexplicable chills and have heard cell doors slam, and have also seen dark apparitions wandering around the halls. If you like haunted places, this might be a great place to go, but maybe wear some protective padding.
Buckeye Jake's Eatery and Bar sounds like a place with some good grub. It must be good though, because the place is still open despite the fact that some staff have run screaming out of the place, never to return. To say it's haunted would be an understatement. What doesn't go on at this place? People will report items flying off the shelves, black shadowy figures roaming through the halls after the place has been closed up for the night, doors opening by themselves, chairs and tables have fallen over seemingly on their own. The sound system will often switch channels out of nowhere. There's even the spectral figure of a woman in a white gown who's known to staff as Helen.
Well, considering the fact that the chairs are moving, we know that James will not be going there. If you guys have been with this channel for a while, you probably know James has a completely rational fear of chairs. Next up, the Ridges, aka Athens Lunatic Asylum. I'm sorry for roasting you so bad. Alright you guys, the asylum was built in Athens, Ohio in 1868, and the first patient to be admitted was a young woman suffering from epilepsy. However, her parents believed that she was possessed by a demon. Of course, it was the 1800s. The institution went on to house men and women with a variety of mental illnesses, as well as war veterans, rule breakers, the homeless, the elderly, and even the criminally insane. I guess it was a kind of hospital slash prison slash municipal lawsuit waiting to happen. Treatments at the hospital often included lobotomies, which either led to death or patients ending up with seizures, hemorrhages, and internal bleeding, causing them to live out the rest of their days as a shell of their former selves. During the hospital's years of operation, 700 women and 959 men died while receiving treatment in the dangerously overcrowded and asbestos-infested facility. One of the most famous deaths that took place on the grounds was that of a 50-year-old female patient who had gone missing for 6 weeks only to be found in an unused room of the asylum. She had taken off her clothes, folded them neatly, and then laid down on the floor to die. It's unclear whether or not foul play was involved, although it does seem kind of strange. Her body left a stain on the floor that is still visible after all of these years, and it is said that that woman, along with many other patients who died on the grounds, continue to roam and haunt the property to this day.
Now we move on to the town of Lancaster. Here, there used to be a home with an incredibly dark past, the Mudhouse Mansion. So the mansion's origins go back to the mid-19th century, when it was built as a grand estate for a wealthy family. But as time went on, the home fell into disrepair, and eventually it was abandoned and left to decay. And over the years, all these urban legends started to form around it. One of the most infamous stories is that the family had actually died in the mansion. Some versions of the tale claim that they were killed by an unknown assailant. Others go that they'd been driven to madness by some sinister force lurking within the mansion's walls. The Mudhouse Mansion was even said to be the birthplace of Bloody Mary herself. The mansion was demolished in 2015, but some folks will still claim to see ghostly figures of the mansion's former residents wandering the grounds, forever trapped in a limbo between the worlds of the living and the dead. Alright, one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in Ohio has to be the Circleville letters case. Now I'm going to paraphrase here because there's a lot of detail. We could probably do an entire video about this case alone, but I'll go over it. It all started in 1976. Residents of Circleville started receiving these unsettling, threatening letters containing all these intimate details of their personal lives. The letters were postmarked from Columbus, Ohio, but there was no return address. One of the receivers of these letters was Mary Gillespie, a bus driver. She was accused in one of these letters of having an affair with the school superintendent, and the letters just kept coming in from this unknown sender. Then, Mary's husband, Ron, also became a target. He received a chilling ultimatum to end his wife's supposed affair or face dire consequences: death. Ron was found dead in his pickup truck after a mysterious phone call which had seemingly confirmed his suspicion about the letter writer's identity. He'd left in his pickup truck with a firearm but was found dead soon after, having crashed into a tree. Now, authorities ruled Ron's death an accident, but then the letters continued. A number of residents received letters saying that Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe, who had investigated Ron's death, had been involved in a cover-up. At one point, this mysterious writer even planted threatening signs along Mary Gillespie's bus route, one of which she went to take down, only to find out it'd been booby-trapped. If Mary had pulled the sign down in a particular way, a small pistol would have fired at her. Now, one man was arrested, Paul Freshore, but it's never been 100% verified that he was behind these letters. Eventually, he got out on parole. Case is still a mystery to this day. In the Hills and Dales Metro Park in Kittering, Ohio, there's a structure with a very shadowy past, the Haunted Witch's Tower, also known as Frankenstein's Castle. It was completed in 1941, and this 30-foot tall tower was constructed by boys with the National Youth Administration using salvaged stone. Its purpose was to provide panoramic views of the community country club, with its lookout platform offering vistas stretching up to 15 miles. But because of how remote the tower is, a lot of young hooligans started flocking there in the 60s. Graffiti covered its walls, and bottles of liquor and beer cans littered the grounds. Even shingles torn from the roof and glass bottles became ammo for attacks on passing cars below on Peterson Boulevard. Then in 1967, during a thunderstorm, a young woman named Peggy Harmison sought shelter inside the tower with her boyfriend, Ronnie Stevens. Bad move. Lightning struck the tower, killing Peggy instantly. Her body was found on the 11th step, half covered in severe burns. Ronnie survived, but he was found in a state of uncontrollable shock, apparently running around screaming. And ever since that night, there have been stories about the ghost of Peggy haunting the tower. Alright, let's switch things up with a haunted golf club. You don't hear about haunted golf clubs very often. Legend has it that in the 60s, a bride fell from a balcony at Oakhurst Golf Club in Grove City, Ohio, and her ghost is said to haunt the establishment to this very day. One of the most frequently reported sightings involves the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in white, believed to be the ghost of the bride. The upstairs kitchen, located near the ballroom where events are held, is said to be a hotspot for paranormal activity. Employees have reported hearing unexplained sounds of pots and pans clanging and knocking late at night, only to discover that items have been mysteriously rearranged by morning. Alright, we're finishing things off today with Minerva. It all began in August of 1978 when the Caton family reported encountering a strange creature near their home. According to the Catons, they were enjoying a quiet evening when they heard unusual noises coming from outside. They came face to face with this towering ape-like creature standing over 7 feet tall. The creature reportedly had shaggy dark fur covering its body, it had glowing red eyes, and emitted this foul odor. The Catons quickly ran back to the safety of their home and phoned the cops. In the days that followed, all these other sightings of a mysterious creature were reported by other residents of Minerva. Witnesses described similar encounters with a large, hairy beast lurking in the shadows, but none of the stories were scarier than the Catons, who said the creature returned to their property several times, hurling rocks at their home, staring at them through their kitchen window, and even killing their dog. It's one of the most violent Bigfoot cases ever reported. Here's something you don't hear about every day. A haunted mall, only in Ohio, right? Sandusky Mall in Erie County has its Erie County, perfect name. It has its fair share of ghostly urban legends and ghost stories. One story goes that a police officer noticed a mysterious red light at the mall's main entrance one night around 1:30 a.m. while he finished up some paperwork in his squad car, and as he approached the light, it had just vanished. He thought it could have been mall security, but it turned out they were all the way on the other side of the building. An employee at Kaufman's department store reported feeling an unexpected cold presence and actually fell over when she turned around to see what it was. She got this gust of cold air and nobody was actually there. Even the American Eagle at this mall is haunted. Like, how many places in the world are you gonna find a haunted American Eagle? One of the most frequently reported ghostly sightings at the mall is the woman in the red dress. Two of the most well-known accounts are from an overnight security guard and a visitor of the mall. The overnight guard had been on patrol when he mistook her for a real person and called the police before this woman in the dress just vanished into thin air. There have also been reports of a headless hitchhiker and a driverless car seen outside the mall. Never have I wanted to go to a mall so badly.
Next on our list today we have Franklin Castle, located in Cleveland, Ohio. The castle was originally inhabited by the Tideman family. Prior to building Franklin Castle, Haynes Tideman and his wife lived in a different house on the same property, but tragedy struck and one by one the couple watched as almost all of their sons and daughters died. After the tragic losses, the Tidemans decided to tear down their previous home and build the Franklin Castle in its place, but it seems that whatever was haunting the family was unfazed by the change of scenery. Mrs. Tideman died in 1890, and after that the Tidemans' remaining sons and daughters lost their lives as well. After Haynes Tideman passed, it is rumored that the castle's many hidden passages became a meeting place for local members of a foreign hate group. Not only that, but apparently during one of those meetings a killing spree broke out. The house, which some believe to be the most haunted house in all of Ohio, is now open to the public, and visitors to the castle who have slept in the rooms of the deceased report having felt the presence of the dead, as well as having heard strange noises throughout the home. If you do decide to visit, I think it's like a one-night stay. It's pretty creepy. If you have visited, let me know all about it.
Next up we have Fudge Road in Gratis. How could a place named Fudge Road possibly be evil? Well, it turns out the place is just teeming with ghoulies. You got the spirits of two men who died on the road during an illicit substance bust. There have also been sightings of a white humanoid beast reported in the area. The bridge on Fudge Road, known locally as Crybaby Bridge, has multiple ghosts. Legend has it that a mother in the 1800s threw her son off the bridge, and his spirit is still said to haunt the area, along with the spirit of a woman who hanged herself from the bridge after losing her infant. It's said that if you park your car there, you shut it off, roll down the window, and say "Mama" 3 times, you might hear the ghostly cries of one of those little ghosts. And finally, you have the story of a truck driver who died after driving off the bridge, and he haunts the place, of course, because no one in Ohio just dies and stays dead, apparently.
Next up, we've got Helltown, located in the Boston township of Summit County in Ohio. Not only is it a ghost town, but it's a ghost town. Ghosts Town. It was founded in 1806, but in 1974, President Ford ordered the town to be vacated so that the area could be used as a national park. Or so he said. People were forced out of their homes until the entire township was abandoned. Originally, the homes were supposed to be demolished and removed, and the land brought back to its natural state, but neither of those things ever happened. Instead, the town sat abandoned and destitute, begging the question of why its residents were forcibly forcibly removed in the first place. Many believe that there was a chemical spill in the area and that the government's removal of the town's residents was actually a cover-up, but of course there's no way to be sure. What we do know is that after the townspeople left, the area became the perfect setting for satanic worship. The grounds are now said to be cursed by the devil, thus earning itself the very fitting nickname, Helltown.
Hereford Station in New London is said to be haunted by a woman named Augusta Bowman. In the mid-1890s, Hereford Station was a busy hub on the B&O Railroad. It's now abandoned, but it's still home to some creepy spectral figures, or really one. The station, alongside a hotel and restaurant, sat in a valley just south of New London on Route 60. Augusta Bowman, a single mother of two who worked in the local restaurant, became romantically entangled. She had an entanglement with the married restaurant owner, but when he discovered that she planned to leave him for another man, he got jealous. Hypocritical much? He killed Bowman and disposed of her body in a nearby creek. Well, guess who haunts the area now? Railroad workers have been known to report seeing a distressed young woman wandering near the edge of the woods along the tracks, who of course vanishes into thin air. Oh, and here's a really creepy thing though that's been said to happen. Locals will see a white-faced woman just peering into their windows at night. And I imagine they go outside and she's not there anymore.
And finally, we have the Lima Tuberculosis Hospital, a sanitarium whose doors originally opened in 1911 during the rise of the tuberculosis epidemic. At first, the hospital was equipped with only 24 beds, but in 1927, due to a rise in the number of infected individuals, the hospital was remodeled to hold 158 beds. The sanitarium was in operation for 62 years, during which time an estimated 3,000 patients died from their illnesses under the hospital's care, which is wild considering that it didn't house a lot of people. Now, the grounds are said to be extremely haunted, of course, by deceased patients. People have claimed to have had ghosts following them through the halls of the abandoned building, and on the third floor, explorers have reported hearing a very low, steady pounding noise, as well as having seen shadowy figures quickly moving around the halls and in and out of rooms. Today, the area is pretty heavily guarded by police, as it is not only abandoned but also banned for the safety of the public. So if you are hoping to go ghost hunting in Ohio, you might have to leave this one off your list, unfortunately, despite the fact that it would probably be a pretty cool place to visit. But I'm not condoning that. That's liability is not mine. No, don't go.
Well, there you have it. Some destinations for all of you to go to, including that last one.
Oh, okay.
On your next Ohio trip, folks.
But you didn't hear that from us. I've been your host, Hannah Thompson.
I've been your host, James.
Stay safe and don't get arrested.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. Viewer discretion advised. It's about disturbing real-life demon photos that you won't believe are real, but have been confirmed by the Pope himself. Click the video now to find out more. See you guys in the next video.